Everyone, and welcome to this review note. In this clip, we are going to look at another use case combining role-based access control and NTFS permissions. If you've ever worked at a company before, you probably have been in that situation where your department or your team in your department has a shared folder out on the network that everybody can get access to that content, but you can't get the content to the other teams. And we're going to look at setting that up. The way we're going to look at setting this up is any member of the team is going to have the ability to create content within the team folder, but none of the other team members are going to be able to modify that content. They will be able to read it. That may not be the same for every organization, but that's the way we're going to set this one up. If you looked at the previous videos for other use cases and the basics, you will probably recognize some of these users and groups. We've added some more. What I've added in for the HR team, I've added in security groups for the HR team for both read and read-write, and I've added in security groups for access for the operations team for both read and read-write. Now, I want everybody who is in the departments, the team members, to have both of these access permissions. So if we look in from a roles perspective in HR, we've got two different roles. There's a staff and then the pubs maintainer. If you haven't watched the publications video, you might want to go back and look at that because it'll kind of fill this in a bit. But I want everybody with either of these roles to be a member of both the read and the read-write for the HR team resources. So I'm going to take these two groups and I'm going to make them a member of the HR team read and the HR team read-write. And then I'm going to take my ops roles. I'm going to make them members of the same thing on the ops side. So if I pull up my ops, if I pull up my access groups for ops, here is team read and team read-write. So let's take a look at that quickly. Here's my Team HR folder. If I open this, my members are both the HR staff and the HR pubs maintainer roles, and then we'll see similar things for the other security groups as well. Let's go over and see how we're going to apply those. Switch over onto my file server. I've got a Teams directory created. This is already shared out. Everybody has full control from a share perspective as per best practices. If I open Teams, we can see HR and operations, so each team is going to have their own folder. If I look at HR for now as an example, pull up the properties, look at security, and if I look at my access control list, we can see that this is inherited from the root of the drive. Everybody has read, everybody can write and create content, nothing special for my teams at this point in time. So let's fix that up. Go back up onto the Teams folder, bring up the security properties, and I'm going to go into advanced. One of the things we saw before is that the first thing we want to do is get rid of these users. I'm going to disable the inheritance. We'll say we'll convert. I'm going to get rid of the access control entry that provides write, so that's going to go away. I still need users to get through that Teams directory, but I don't want that to be inherited. So you might remember that we can take this particular folder. I'm going to make a change to this guy by editing it, and I'm going to change the scope from applies to everything to this folder only, which means that the users will be able to get into the folder, they'll be able to see the content, but because that permission won't be inherited, they won't be able to get into any of the subfolders. So we'll say OK to that, and we're set. So now all of our users, I don't care what team they're from, will be able to get into this folder and see the team folders inside. Good to go there. And let's change up HR so that that is going to behave for us correctly. So I'm going to grab my HR folder, bring up the properties, over onto security. I'll go into advanced. Now, what I want, if you remember from a little bit earlier, is I want everybody on the team to be able to read everything in the folder. Pretty easy to do. I'll say I want to add in. My security principal is going to be the access group for the HR team. I'll give them read. This is automatically read execute by default. That's all good. The scope is this folder, subfolders, and files. This will be inherited to every single file system object created inside the HR folder. And I'll say OK to that. And here is my access control entry. Notice this is explicit. Now, what about being able to create things, though? Now, we said before we wanted to have users be able to create, but we don't want anybody able to modify what they created, only look at it. So I'm going to add in another access control entry. I'm going to give people, in this case, for the access group HR team read write. We'll say OK. Add in the right permission, but in this case, I'm going to limit that to this folder only. So that means that whoever's a member of the group that we specified here, HR team read write, meaning everybody that's in HR, is going to be able to write and create on this folder, and then they will be able to only modify their own stuff. Everybody else will be able to read. So let's say OK to this, and I'm going to apply that. And let's take a look at effective access here. So if I come along and say that I want to look at somebody who's in HR. So if I grab an HR user and look at their effective permissions, then they're going to have modify on that folder. If I look at somebody who's in operations and look at their effective permission, they get nothing because they're not on the HR team and there's nothing explicit. So they're going to be able to see the teams folder, the content for that, because they have read permission on that as a member of users, but that permission does not get inherited, and they will not be able to see anything in HR because there's nothing on the ACL for that. All right, again, back to the ACL. So we've got AC team read and execute, applies to everything, read and write, this folder only. While we're here, another thing you might find very commonly is that users can create folders. Other users are allowed to create content in those folders, but they can't change the files. If that's the case, the scope instead of this folder only, this folder and subfolders, but leave the files out of it. And then people can create content in other people's folders if they create that. Another kind of common spin on this use case. Again, looking in here, no users, and therefore the ops folks can't get into that. And it's that easy to set up, so really, really simple to do. And again, following those best practices at the root folder, the teams folder, few permissions. As we get further down into the directory structure, we add more permissions in to make access more permissive. And that's a wrap for the video. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and we'll see you next time.